Bezrat Hashem. Need a few more people to sign up, but people are slowly signing up.
Good. If you need a reference, it's a good place to be.
That I have no doubt. Okay. All right. Let's start a new siman today. B'din hachzer tashlum avor nesia be'emtzaut kartisiya. Okay. So there's a couple of new words. You want to get a refund for a trip in the middle of the kartisiya. It's on a card, it seems like. Nasati im chaveri lekotel ma'avaravi ba'otobus. So here's the story. I traveled with my friend to the kotel on a bus. Below hayali kesef. I had no money. B'chaveri shilem alai bekartisiya sheba mechir nisiya hu namuch mimechir hatashlum shel nisiya bodedet. My friend paid for me on his card. You know, they have these, what is it, Rav-Kav? They have these cards. And so he paid for me to transport me to the kotel. And when you do it on the Rav-Kav, on this card, it costs less than, buying a one-time fare. Kama alay lahachzir lo lefi shivui tashlum nisiya regila o lefi mechir nisiya bekartisiya. So what do I owe my friend for the bus ride? Do I owe him a regular fare, or do I owe him just what it cost him on his Rav-Kav card? What would you say? So do I just owe him what his money he put out? Or since I got the benefit of a full fare, maybe I should have to pay him for his full fare and let him pocket the profit. It's not ribis. Yeah, but it may be a small amount that's paid out over the first year. It ends up paying for itself. Yeah. Yeah. Now, let's assume the guy's not out of any additional cost. But do you pay for benefit received, or do you pay for the out-of-pocket expense? Is really the question. If we want to write it in a sort of a larger context. So, okay, he's not losing anything, but the truth is, he gave me a benefit that is worth X, even though he spent less on that benefit. Maybe I owe him because I got that benefit of X. Zenehene v'zelo chaser. Okay.
The transportation companies have to pay regular fare for them. Maybe he owes the person the amount it cost him. The difference of the regular ticket and the discount ticket to the company.
Well, why would he have to pay the company? The company's offering discounted fares. Yeah, but is that really so? Are they telling the cardholder that he can only use it for himself? Is there such a restriction?
Oh, okay. I don't know.
So when you do it with your family, you get one card and you just pass it 5 times. You don't need 5 cards. No, but he's a friend. So use the benefits to have a good friend.
Subway Presto card.
You're not supposed to give your Presto card to anyone else?
I don't think so.
I can't take a friend on the subway with me?
One could say that's not fair.
We'll give him.
I think
we'll
the
give
issue
him a pass.
used to be on the TTC used to be the Metro Pass, because that was like a monthly fee for your use, and then if other people used it, there would be too many multiple uses for one flat fee. With a Presto card, I'm not sure, because each time you tap it, it charges. So,
I'm not sure.
okay, that's a problem. That's a problem. Because it actually dings differently. So when you tap it, right, but if you tap it and you're younger than 65, they can notice that. And they'll say you're 40 years old, why are you tapping one that goes ding instead of ding ding? So, yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Let's see what Rav Sharaga tells us. He says, Nira ledamot she'ela zu l'ma shekasuf b'maseches ksuvos. He says there's a story in the Gemara that I think he says I think is analogous. The Gemara misaperet sham al adam shahaya chayav lechavero elef zuz v'lo shilem lo. That a person owed his friend 1,000 zuz, hadn't paid it back. V'hayu lo shtei dirot shekol echad shaveh chamesh meyot zuz umachar otam la'adam shlishi. So in order to pay back his debt, he had 2 apartments. These 2 apartments were each worth 500 zuz. So he sold them to a third party. He says, now, we know that when a person is a debtor, all of his assets, including his real estate, are encumbered assets. And so when a person sells a property that has a lien on it, the creditor can come and seize that asset. What is this? Can more than one person use the same Presto card? Presto cards can be shared, but can only be used by one person to travel at a time.
Otherwise, you have a 2-hour window. So if two people tap it in the same 2 hours, they don't pay an extra fare. That's
So if you get on the bus first and tap it and pass it back, the second tap won't work.
Really?
well, it'll let you in for free.
Because you have 2 hours window to transfer, you have the transfer, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's
You
right.
can use it as many times in a 2-hour period.
But I think
You should,
it works.
Marvin, you should get a case for your phone. Because if you drop it, you're toast.
Plug isn't working well, and then I put it on that cradle thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what the case is on.
Yeah.
It's-
You got to get a different case. Yeah.
I think you should get it just in case, really.
We're going to give you one more pass, Paul, because you made a simcha Monday. Yeah.
I heard my speech, my wedding,
Yeah.
but I didn't extend it beyond that. So,
Okay.
but I will
All
try
right.
and extend it to the next 15 minutes.
All right. Okay, so a person sold his 2 apartments. They were already encumbered to the creditor. Okay, lachein bahamal v'shaya magilo elef zuz lakona shekanet shtei hadirot v'lakach dira echat bishvil chatzi mechovo. So the creditor came along, who was owed 1,000 zuz, and he went to the buyer of the apartments. He seized one of the apartments to pay back half of what was owed to him. So the creditor came to seize the second apartment, but the purchaser said to him, Tir'eh, imata me'unyan lakachat rak dira echat ulahashiv ota ki'ilu hishava elef bevakasha. He said, if you're following the Hebrew? So he said, listen, if you'd like to consider one dira worth 1,000 zuz, fine, consider your debt paid. Aval imlo ani muchan l'shalem lecha et achov b'sach elef zuz b'mezuman va'al tiga b'dirot. But if not, if you feel that you haven't been properly paid yet, I'm prepared to give you what is owed to you for 1,000 zuz, but please just leave me the apartments. In other words, I'm prepared to pay an extra 1,000 zuz because I want these 2 apartments. Amal v'hiskim lekabel dira echad be'elef V'kach sagru et hachov shel mocher hadirot. So the Malva agreed to accept 1,000 zuz for one of those dirot, and that's how they closed the debt, and then the deal was done. And it seems like because the Malva had already seized the first dira, the buyer, the third party buyer, basically said, "I'll give you 1,000 zuz for the dira that's left." Okay, and I guess maybe at that point the Malva relinquished the first dira that he had already seized. It's unclear. Sham. So the Gemara's dispute in that case over there is the Choser Hakone Eitzel Hamocher Legabot et Demei Hadira Shenatan Lamalva. Now, the buyer now has a right to go back to the previous owner of these apartments, who was a debtor. Okay, and he has a right to collect his 1,000 zuz, because he shouldn't have to pay 2,000 zuz for property that's only worth 1,000 zuz. So the buyer owns both properties now, but he has a right to go back to the original guy who sold it to him and said, "You sold me encumbered property. You have to give me that money back." So ha'im hu gova chamesh meot kafi shivui hadira shehevilo, o shegova elef kevin shesiluk oto mechov sheshave kein. So the question is as follows: the fellow paid 1,000 zuz for only one apartment because the Malva had already seized the first apartment, but he basically paid 1,000 for one dira that was only worth 500. So does he have a right to collect 1,000, or does he only have a right to collect 500? Because the Lova can tell him, "Hey, the Malva seized that apartment, so half of his debt was already paid. The fact that you paid him 1,000 for one apartment, that's not my problem. You overpaid. I only have to pay you back 500. Upaska haGemara sham shegova rak chamesh meot kizehu shivui hadira shehipsid." And the Gemara paskins that the buyer can only collect 500 from the Lova, because that's the amount of the apartment that he lost. V'chein pasak harambam, v'chein pasak maran b'shulchan aruch. That's how the Rambam paskins, and that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. So, right. So there's a differential here between what the apartment building is really worth 500. The apartment is worth 500, but the guy is out of pocket 1,000. So which one do you look at? Do you look at the value, or do you look at the out-of-pocket expenditure? Here it's the opposite, though, because the out-of-pocket expenditure is higher than the value. In the case of the Rav-Kav, the bus ride, the value is higher than the out-of-pocket expense. Harei muchach she'afal pi sheherviach et halova elef. So we see that even though the guy who was the debtor who sold the properties ended up making $1,000 on the deal, mikol makom kevin shehakona atzmo hifsid rak chamesh meot, the guy he sold it to lost 500. Lachein zeh hasikum she haloi v'chayav l'shalem lo, and therefore that's the amount that the lova is obligated to sell him. V'chein b'she'ela zu, afal pi shahachaver hirviach nesiah shahayat tzarich l'shalem aleha mechir ragil. He says in this situation as well, even though, and I want to make sure that I have the story right in the Gemara, because there's something that I'm missing here Let's take a look at the Gemara in Ksuvas, Daf Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis, and make sure that we have the story right. Okay. Ahu Gavra de Hamaski Be'al Fazuzeh. There was a certain man who had a creditor with a claim of 1,000 dinars against him. He had two mansions. He's, oh, sorry, I did not share the screen. Okay, so let me take care of that. New share. There we are. There was a certain man who had a creditor with a claim of 1,000 dinars against him. He had two mansions. He sold them, one for 500 and the other one for 500. The creditor came and repossessed one of them from the purchaser as the repayment of part of his debt. He subsequently sought to repossess the other mansion as well in payment for the remainder of his debt. The purchaser took 1,000 dinars and went to the creditor. He said to him, if the first mansion that you repossessed is worth 1,000 dinars to you, very well. Let it be yours in exchange for the entire sum that is owed to you. And if not, take these 1,000 dinars and abrogate your rights to both of the mansions, leaving them both in my possession. Okay. So the way that the Gemara, the way that he's explaining it is that the guy, the purchaser, is essentially paying him 1,000 dinars, but really, what is he ending up getting? Let it be yours in exchange for the entire sum that is owed to you, and if not, take these 1,000 dinars and abrogate your rights to both of the mansions, leaving them both in my possession. So Rami Bar Chama thought to say that this case is identical to that which is taught in the Mishnah. If the orphans say we inflate the value of our father's property by a dinar, the court does not listen to them. This appears to be the case here as well, and the value of the mansion should not be assessed at higher than its market value. Okay, meaning that really the fellow who's the buyer, right? What is he actually paying for? Is he paying for both mansions, or is he paying just for one mansion? He seems to be paying for one mansion, buying it back from the creditor, and the creditor is sort of the transaction between the two of them is on one mansion because it's on the mansion that the creditor seized. The creditor hasn't yet seized the second mansion. So the first mansion that he's already seized, the buyer is trying to get it back. And he says, here, take $1,000 and that'll be to buy back the mansion, and you promise not to seize the second mansion. But really what he's done is he's paid $1,000 for a $500 mansion. So the Rava said to him, are these two cases comparable? There in the Mishnah, the other orphans whose mother's marriage contract was of lesser value will suffer financial loss. But here in the case of the creditor, does he incur a loss? He lent 1,000 dinars and took 1,000 dinars. Consequently, it would be cruel on his part to refuse to take the money and insist on taking the second mansion from the purchaser. So that's the issue. The issue is that the malva, since he's already been appeased and is taking $1,000 that he originally lent, we don't allow him to seize the second mansion, even though he could potentially claim that, well, you only paid me for the first mansion, I still have a right to seize the second mansion. And we don't allow him to do that. Okay? So that seems to be the situation that we're describing. So, but now when the buyer goes to collect his damages to the guy who sold it, to the debtor, he goes back to the debtor, he can only collect 500 because that's really the value of the mansion that he purchased. Okay? So now let's go back. So he says, okay. Hare muchach she'afal pi sheherviach et halove elef. So you see from here, the love, the guy who was the debtor, who sold the two buildings, he received $1,000. Mikol makom kevin shahakona atzmo hifsid rak chamesh me'ot. But he says, but since the buyer only lost out 500, even though he paid 1,000 for it, so that's the amount that the lova has to pay him. And so therefore, in this shaila as well, so the chaver, right, the friend got the benefit of a ride. He would normally have to pay a full fare. But since his friend only lost the value of the discounted fare, that would be the amount that the fellow would owe him. In other words, I'm not really sure about the comparison. I'm really not following the comparison properly. He's saying that you take a look that what did I end up losing? Oh, I see. In other words, the buyer, what did he end up losing? He ended up losing when the creditor seized one of those properties. The buyer ended up losing $500 worth of real estate. He ended up paying $1,000 and was out of pocket $1,000. But since the true value of that, the value of the thing that he lost was only worth 500. And he extended a $500 value. He was out of he lost an asset of $500. It doesn't matter that he paid more for it. He still is only owed the asset of $500 that he lost. Here too, Rav Sharaga wants to argue that the guy with the card lost an asset of, let's say, 75 cents when a full fare is $1. Okay? So the argument that he's trying to make is you only lost a 75-cent asset because for you it costs 75 cents. And that's the true value, even though for this other guy, he would have had to pay $1. He only owes the 75 cents to the card holder. Now, he says, now the annotator says that this is what Rav Sharaga wrote in another sefer where he actually gives real case scenarios. V'hosef sham Rabbeinu she'echad Idayana Yerushalayim pasak she'hachaver chayv lahachzir lo mechir shel nesiya milaya. And Rav Sharaga writes over there that another posek in Yerushalayim disagreed with him and said that the guy who got the bus ride on the card has to pay the full fare, has to pay the full $1 back to his friend. V'hei raya lazeh mehad de'isa bebava mitzia de'im echad shiber chavis sha'ola arba. The Gemara talks about a story about a person who broke someone else's barrel that is worth 4 zuz. V'yom hashuk hachavis nimkeres b'chamesh. But if you wait until the Yom Hashuk, you know what the Yom Hashuk is? It's Mondays and Thursdays. So if you sell it on an off day, then you only get 4 zuz for it. But if you wait until the marketplace day, you can fetch $5 for it. So chayav l'shalem lo chamesh ayin sham. So you have to pay the guy 5 for the loss of the barrel. Hare afal pisha l'nizik hachavis olsa arba. So you see that even though that for the damaged party he may have only paid 4 zuz for that barrel, Mikol makom kevin shahashivu shela b'yom hashuku chamesh chayev l'shalim lo chamesh. But since he could get 5 for it, you have to pay him the full 5, because the guy can say to you, "Hey, my barrel, I was planning to sell it for 5. I bought it for 4, but I was going to sell it for 5. The fact that you broke my barrel now means that I can't make that extra zuz. You should pay me what I was planning to sell it for." In Kain hu adin kan, that sounds like a more direct analogy to me. He says over here as well, Afal pisha hanasiya bekartisiya also lo chatzi mechir. Let's say the fare on a card is half, he says it's half, let's say it's 50 cents. It's only 50 cents, and the full fare is $1. Chayev l'shalim lo kafi masha nasiya regila ola ad kan devarav. So you should have to pay the guy what a full fare is worth. Ulam Rabbeinu Shlita Shamdacha Devara Vikasa. He says, however, Rav Sharaga said that's not a good analogy, because he writes, Jeshaini Hasam Dechol HaChavuyo Shavos Chamesh B'Yom HaShuk. He says, because he writes over there that all barrels on marketplace day are worth a full 5. V'nimtza shehivsidu chamesh ki yachal lemachro b'mechir zeh. Since the guy could have sold his barrel on marketplace day, he's therefore lost a 5 zuz commodity. Masha'enken bekartisiya lo hisido mechir shel nesir regila ki tamid afshar liknot kartisiya b'mechir muzal ad kan tochen devarav. He says, but anyone can buy a Rav Kav card, and since anyone can buy a Rav Kav card, it's just a matter of convenience that I didn't have one on me that day, and you extended yourself, but I could have bought a card and gotten it at a discounted rate. So it's not the same as a barrel where everyone has to pay the same price for it. V'hinei matzanu b'sefer Mishpatei HaTorah shekasav d'chayv lahachzelo kafi shivoi nesira regila. Now we have another sefer called Mishpatei HaTorah that also paskins against Rav Sharaga and says that the guy who benefited has to pay a full fare. He's got to pay a full $1 to the guy who extended him the ride, even though for him it's only, let's say, either 50 cents or 75 cents. Behavior, yeah.
Why he's making money for the ride? He should be making extra money for the ride. Okay, he lends you his car, but the real profit should be for the transportation company.
Why are they entitled to it?
Because that's the rules. If you pay one ticket, it's $1. If you buy the car, it's 50 cents.
I'm letting him use my card. He's now a temporary card holder, so the bus company says anyone who presents the card is entitled to a ride for 75 cents. I don't know why the bus company is entitled to make the money. So I'm not sure why, I'm not, your argument is that they're the ones that are providing the service, but the service is available to a card holder at 75 cents. He's now a card holder because I lent him my card. They don't make the rules on that every card holder has to keep the card to himself. Like it could be on these Presto cards, So as you see, it's quite interesting what we compare this to. So in the Sefer Mishpatei HaTorah, he says that you have to give him the value of a full fare. And he brings the proof from the story of the barrels in the Gemara. Va'od bir bazeh, de'im ledugma echad kana kamos shel schora mesuyemet, ve'heviu lo matana shel bakbuk yain sheshava esrim shekel. He says, for example, he wants to analogize it to the following. A guy purchases a certain amount of merchandise, and he's brought a gift of a bottle of wine that's worth 20 shekel. Arei vadai, shim echad shiber tababuk hayayin hanal, chayiv l'shalim lo 20 shekel, kiven shezehu shavyu afal pi shekiblo b'chinam. In other words, if I get a gift of a bottle of wine, you give me a gift of a bottle of wine. Okay, so Mordechai gives me a gift of a bottle of wine. Ron clumsily knocks it over at my table, and right, and it shatters, and the wine is lost. What does Ron owe me? Well, I maybe, but the bottom line is, how much did I pay for the bottle of wine? Nothing. I got it for free. Okay. Does that mean that Ron can say, well, you were gifted that bottle of wine, you didn't lose anything by it? Yeah. So therefore, what you see is that it's not based on my out-of-pocket expense, but it's the value of that bottle of wine.
And you got a bottle. He said he's willing to pay you the 20 for the bottle, even though that I pay only 18 because I bought the whole case.
That's right.
Yeah, but if I have a case of 12, I get a discount. But in this case, it's
So
one bottle.
when I give someone my card and they want to pay me back in cash, shouldn't they pay me back the value of a full fare? Let's follow this up tomorrow. Okay. Have a great day, everybody.